another episode, but the first episode on the Orange Couch. I am Rory T, and guess what? I am more sober than yesterday. I am finally on my comfy orange couch that I decided to name this podcast after, and for good reason. Not a great story, not a funny story per se, but after doing quite a few meetings with the same group, and I typically do those through Zoom, this couch was always in the background. And I'll share a photo of the full couch on the socials. But every now and then somebody would make a comment like, that is quite the orange couch. And usually my dogs are sitting up here, perched up here, laying down while I'm doing the meetings and whatnot. But it is such an ungodly color that it just is obnoxious. And I tend to be pretty obnoxious myself. I sure as hell was obnoxious when I was drinking all the time. And I sure as hell was obnoxious when I was drinking all the time. So it's just pretty fitting that I decided to call the podcast and the socials, Sober Orange Couch. Or for TikTok, Orange Sober Couch. For some reason, it wasn't available. But I have an interesting talk today. I wanted to touch on our inner critic because we tend to be our biggest critic. When I was drinking, I always made sure that I was so hard. I wanted to talk about a few things today, starting off with the inner critic that represents ourselves. And I've got two of those. I have a sober inner critic and I have a drunk inner critic. I lived 24 years of my life with my drunk inner critic. My drunk inner critic didn't give a fuck about anyone else. And you're probably going to say, well, it's your inner critic. Why would you care about anyone else besides yourself? And the question is simple. When we critique ourselves, we're always trying to be, in my case, a perfectionist. We're always trying to ensure that everything is going to plan at every given moment in time. And for me, in order for everything to go perfectly right, everyone else around me had to be doing what I needed them to do so that I could cover up all my tracks of the drinking. And, it's tough. It's tough to go back and think about what I thought about as a drunk, as far as my critic, because what I can remember mostly is that I was so hard on myself to push out all the problems in my life, drown out all the problems in my life, hide from all the problems in my life. And alcohol made it so easy. I literally had to open a beer, pour a scotch, whatever it was in that given moment. And as soon as that alcohol touched my lips, everything faded away. And it was hyper focused on what I was going to be doing that day, around what alcohol and where. And as the day went on and as the drinks kept flowing, I began to perfect my craft so that I could easily drink what I wanted without anyone knowing how much was actually being consumed. Because that's one thing that bothered me, actually. That's one thing that I thought about on a daily basis, especially in the mornings when I woke up, was, good Lord, I drank so many drinks. I had 20 beers yesterday in total. And then I would sit there in the morning and think back like, holy crap, I was up at 3 a.m. I couldn't sleep anymore. So I drank, I opened a beer, I drank another. By the time anyone got up out of bed by 5:36 a.m., I was 5-6 beers in. And I would hate myself for that, but guess what I would do? I would just hide. I would start all over again. The daily rat race that was my life. Sure, it wasn't always like that. I didn't just start at the age of 14 and waking up at 3 a.m. It's progressive, and that's a big deal with this disease, that the progressiveness of alcoholism is so brutal. And from the time 12 years ago that I went into my first intensive outpatient treatment, I didn't want to get sober. And I've said this time and time again, but the progressiveness of how I was drinking didn't faze me. I didn't think about it. I only started thinking about it last year when I went into a residential program. But even then, I didn't believe that progressiveness was truly a part of alcoholism. When I relapsed 8.5 months in, it only took me 4 days to feel like I was living 24 years of my life. So that 4 days became such a long span, how I felt mentally, that I was like, holy crap. I think I finally understand what the progressiveness of alcoholism means. Of course, I wasn't ready to drink. And 30 days later, on my 30th day of sobriety, after um, getting some help and only going into AA, I relapsed again. But this time it only took 12 hours. And from 7 a.m. until pretty much 7 p.m. when I fell asleep, it felt like another 24 years when I woke up. And I feel so bad for the people that were around me. My wife had to come home from a work trip in California early. My parents that were standing there at 2 in the morning, and I had no fucking clue what they were doing there. I was like, what's wrong? Who died? And my kids. Ultimately, my kids, they just saw me as this, oh, he just drinks a lot of those things. And, it hit me hard. And that's when my sober critic decided to tune in. And he said, you got to get help. You're better than this. This is no way to live your life. It's no way to live your life. And it's little moments like those. And I say little moment because it literally was a little moment, because I've actually never said this to anyone. And even after that thought and moment, and my parents being there, and my wife getting on a plane to come home one day after she left, I drank. And I said to myself, I'm going to drink a couple more drinks because this is going to be my last time. And as of right now, that was my last time. But it's that misaligned thinking that one critic to the other critic just seem to drown each other out. And then it's ultimately I'm making the decision. And the decision I was making for 24 years wasn't a good one. So after that last couple drinks, I went into another treatment center. I didn't want to do residential. Thankfully, they didn't recommend residential. And it got me to start thinking aligned with my sober self. And my sober self obviously doesn't want to be drunk. My sober self wants to be a normie. My sober self wants to, normie, by the way, is what we call the normal people who can drink, because we sure as hell can't. And fuck them, by the way, for being able to drink normally. But, my sober self didn't want to do this anymore. It was exhausted, tired, just fed up with how everything was going up and down and nothing was going right in my life, although I sure as hell made it look like everything was perfect. That's easy. It's like I was an actor on a movie screen, acting my life away like it was perfect. But it wasn't. And I was tired of living that life. So, it's the simple case. I'm going back to the actor, because you see these stories of actors and actresses who disappear from the screen because they're just tired of it. I was just tired of it. And my sober critic started talking to me every day. He started saying, speak the truth, don't drink today, and find your voice. And ultimately, finding my voice has helped me to talk about the issues that alcohol has brought to me. I've heard stories of people with, multiple years of sobriety, and they talk about, oh, alcohol was never actually the problem. I was the problem. No, for me, alcohol was the fucking problem, because I'm two different fucking people. And the moment I take that first sip of alcohol, it's Dr. Jekyll and Hyde for me. And I hated hearing that from people. So the inner critic I've kept sober because the inner critic is also Dr. Jekyll and Hyde. The inner critic has stayed sober, and I continue daily to remind myself why I don't want to go back. Why sobriety is the answer for me now. Because alcohol kept me in a prison of lies. And I don't want to go back. And I'm not going back. Because today I'm sober. Oh boy, that was all over the place.